Hi there. Today I'm going to continue this series on Windows 10 accessibility settings, and I'm going to go over display and magnifier. So I'm going to get right into it. The first setting here is a slider, which basically just adjusts the size of text on the screen relative to everything else. When setting up a computer for someone, I'll put it at 150%, and then I'll modify it later based on individual needs. The next setting makes everything on the screen bigger. It is what it's called. I'd be careful with this one because if you go too big, it can be kind of disorienting. So I usually start at 125% and go from there. Alright, next up we have brightness. This one's good to adjust if someone frequently gets headaches from looking at the screen. That's really the only time I've ever used it, was for somebody who their eyes got tired looking at the screen too much, so that's good to keep in mind. One setting I really like is called nightlight. This is one I personally use. It basically just changes the backlight on the screen to a more calming yellowish color, which is less of a shock if you just wake up and look at the screen for the first time. I turn on the schedule setting for this one and set it to sunset to sunrise. For show animations, I don't notice this one having too much of an effect, but what it does is it makes the screen and changes on the screen a little bit more user-friendly by showing motion. So for example, if you minimize or maximize this window, you can see a sort of visual effect as it increases and decreases in size, and if you turn it off, it'll just be instantaneous and you won't see any visual effects. So that's what that does. For show transparency in Windows, you can try it out yourself, but I typically think this one makes things harder to see, so I keep it off when I'm setting up a computer, but take a look at it and see if you think it'd be valuable. Lastly, we have automatically hide scroll bars, which I keep off because they provide visual cues for people, and show desktop background image. When this one depends on the person, but if I'm doing touchscreen, I'll turn that off as well. The next section I was going to cover in this video is Magnifier, and this is another group of settings that are intended to help people with low vision, and I see this as kind of a next step after you try making everything bigger and making text bigger and those kinds of things. The first magnifier settings you'll see are obviously the option to turn it on and off. You'll see an option to adjust the zoom level, and I start with 100% typically. And then you'll see some sign-in options, and obviously if you're working with someone that can't really use the computer without the magnifier, you're going to want to turn it on after sign-in. The most important settings under magnifier are under the View tab, and these are docked, full screen, and lens. What docked does is it creates a section of the screen that shows a magnified version of whatever your mouse is traveling over. So you can always look at that and get a better idea of what your mouse is traveling over just by looking up at that corner of the screen. And you can also adjust where that section of the screen is. So in my opinion, this is the second most useful setting. And the next setting is full screen, and this is basically a way more magnified version of the make everything bigger setting in your display settings. And this kind of just makes everything really, really big, and you have to scroll and scroll and scroll to get to different portions of the screen. So this one can be kind of disorienting, similar to the make everything bigger setting, but for some, I'm sure it's really useful. And the last setting is the most useful in my opinion, and that's the lens. And that basically turns your mouse into a magnifying glass. So whatever you drag it over is magnified. And I like this one because it offers the most control to a user, and it's sort of the most intuitive because it acts like a real magnifying glass, and you can just scroll over whatever you want to see and it gets bigger. So it's really simple to use. So those are our main three settings under magnifier, and I think that's all I have for you today. So stay tuned next time for more AT tutorials.